As the second app that we're going to be building together is a recipes app, where I can see different categories of cuisines, such as Italian, Mexican, Indian, Middle Eastern, and I can click on this category. I can view recipes, and I can learn how to make these meals myself. So this is our home screen. So these are the categories of recipes that we have so far. We have the title here. We have Italian, Mexican, Indian, and Middle Eastern categories for foods. And we have our bottom nav bar with our home icon and our favorites icon here. So these are the categories. This is what I see when I first open the app. Say I want to search for recipes by Middle Eastern cuisine. I'm going to click on Middle Eastern. And here we go. We have our first recipe here that we can see. It's the only one for Middle Eastern, so I'm going to click on hummus and find out how to make hummus. The text here is just placeholders for now, but you've got a picture of the recipe. You've got the title of the recipe here, hummus. You've got the time it takes to make, which in this case is 20 minutes. You've got the difficulty, which is hard, which I think is wrong because hummus is quite easy. And this is a nice description about hummus. You've then got a list of all the ingredients that a user would need to buy to make this. And then in the top right, I've got my favorites icon here. So when I click this, I should be able to add hummus to my favorites list, which we can see here on the home screen. So when we go back to the home, in our bottom tab bar here, we've got our favorites tab, and you can see that you've got the title of the screen here as favorites. So we know where we are in the app, and hummus is there. So I've added hummus to my favorites. So if we think about user stories here, a user can view all categories of recipes. They can view recipes per category. Then they can view a single recipe. The user can add a recipe to their favorites, and they can view all of their favorite recipes. And the last thing that we want to be able to do is, if we had lots of categories here and lots of different recipes, then it would be really useful to be able to filter them to the ones that I want. When you're talking about app design, you want to make it as the cognitive load as low as possible for a user to find what they want in the app. So say we had 20 different categories. This is what the icon here is for. So let's go into here, and now we can see our filters. These are some example filters. So in the database, you might have, for a recipe, it might be vegetarian, or it might be not vegetarian, it might be vegan, it might be gluten-free. And if a user just wants to see vegetarian dishes, let's have a little checkbox here that you click, and then it should filter all the, inside the category, it should filter just the vegetarian dishes, and hummus is vegetarian. And if I turned it off, you'd want to see all the Middle Eastern dishes that aren't vegetarian. Let's think about the functionality. Let's think about the user stories. What can a user do on each screen so we know what features we have to build? So on our home screen, the biggest feature here, the biggest user story, is the ability to view a list of categories. So let's say user can view all categories of recipes. We can also click on a category. So if we click on a category, we can then view all the recipes inside a category. So let's say a user can view all recipes for a single category. Then if I click on the recipe itself, I can then view the recipe. So a user can view a single recipe. And inside this, what's important for a user to see? So I want to see the title. Right at the top here, I have a title. I want to also see the time taken to make the recipe. I want to see the difficulty. How hard is it? How good at cooking do I need to be to make this? I want to see a description. just describing the recipe, and then I want to see a list of ingredients to the recipe. And also, of course, this big thing right here, we've got an image, so let's have an image of the photo of the recipe too. So also here, what I can do as a user is I can favorite the recipe. So let's say the user can add a recipe to their favorite recipes, let's say. Okay, and that should happen if I click on this button. But let's go back. Now, I've added a recipe to my favorites. Now, I'd like to see all my favorites. So let's say, okay, I've got my favorites tab here. Let's say a user can view all their favorite recipes. And then what would also be great is if I wanted to take one off, if I didn't like the recipe, I would be able to click on it and I would be able to remove it from my favorites. So let's say a user can remove recipe from their favorite recipes. And the list should update automatically. And finally, what we spoke about just now is, you know, if there's lots of categories, if there's lots of recipes, I say I'm vegetarian and I only want to find vegetarian recipes, well, I'm going to want to filter by vegetarian. So let's say that a user can filter recipes. And then here we could have lots of different options like vegetarian, we could have gluten-free, we could have sort by difficulty. And these are probably more nice to have features, but you could keep going with these. Difficulty, I can't spell today. There we go. Okay. So there we go. I think these are most of the features that we should be building. And if you build most of these, then you should pretty much get what we've got here on the left-hand side. Let's talk about the database. Let's design the database. So because a user is going to be able to favorite recipes, it means that we need a users table. It means that a user has to log on. So let's say we've got users and we're going to want to see not necessarily the username, but let's say they have a name. Let's say they need an email and a password to log in. And then we're also going to want, tied to this user, favorite recipes. So let's say a list of favorite recipes. And because we have recipes here, it means for sure we're going to need a recipes collection. So we're going to have lots of different recipes in our app. And a recipe is going to have, let's see, let's click on a recipe and let's see what information it has. Okay, so up here we've got our title, we've got the time, the difficulty, a description, and a list of ingredients. So so we've got the name, which can be the title. We've got the time taken to make. We've got the difficulty. We've also got a description, and we've got a list of ingredients, but we can just call this ingredients for now. We've also got this big image up here, so a big image of the recipe. And then because we're connected with the user, we're going to have this relationship between the users and the recipes. So let's say down here, let's talk about our relationships. And we're going to have our first relationship here, which is a user can have many favorite recipes. And a recipe can have many users who favorited the recipe. So we have a many-to-many relationship here between users and users' favorite recipes and a recipe. So in the recipes, let's have a list of users who favorited the recipe. Something like this. You can name it what you like. So that's our recipe, and we also, on our home screen, it's a list of categories, and each recipe belongs to a category. So we're going to need another relationship, and let's say a recipe belongs to one category. So every recipe belongs to one category only. So let's say the relationship is, it's going to be a one-to-many, that a recipe can, let's say, category can have many recipes, but a recipe can only belong to one category. So it's a many to one relationship. So we have these two relationships. And if we have a list of categories, if we have many categories, but we're not sure how many there are going to be, means we're going to want a category table. So let's say these categories. And then each category will have a name, such as Indian or Middle Eastern, and it's also going to have this relationship with a recipe, and it's going to have many recipes. So each category has a name, and it has many recipes. And this is what our database should look like. You've got the users table, you've got a recipes table, and you've got a categories table, and you've got two relationships. You've got a user can have many favorite recipes, and a recipe can have many users who favorited the recipe, so many to many. And then you've also got a category can have many recipes, but a recipe can only have one category. So you've got a many to one relationship. So these are the relationships that we have. And here's the database. And it's time to get building.